okay, everybody knows on this podcast in general, personal, professional, everyone in my life knows that I have grown this obsession with TikTok, except over the last 5 to 6 weeks, every time I've opened it, it's been nonstop coverage of the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial,
Yeah.
which has been kind of insane of a trial. One, because it's been so heavily publicized, but also everybody seems to have an opinion on it. So
Yeah.
it's been a bit off-putting every time I open this app and I see a new person explaining the same trial with their like take on it.
I don't really go on TikTok. I didn't really see that much about it on like Instagram or I did, but like not that much. And I personally just didn't keep up with the trial. Um, but I know that there have been very like polarizing views on it. Um, and like some of the stuff I did see, I was like, that's interesting. Like, not sure that I agree with that, but I don't know. I personally didn't keep up with it, which is surprising. I feel like I should have, but I didn't.
I mean, honestly, I feel like there's so much that's happening in the world, and
Yeah.
like I think around the same
So
time
many
with
global affairs happening.
there was a lot of global affairs happening, and I think I saw this other video. I know someone posted, and it was like, there's so many things happening, but everybody's talking about this trial. So I don't blame you. All this is to say is that I don't blame you for not keeping up, but it was just crazy to me. So I'm not. Everybody's like, you're either Team Amber or Team Johnny. I'm neither, to be honest,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that relationship just seems very toxic in general. And who
Yeah.
am I to have an opinion on domestic violence? Like, it's, I'm not, I
Yeah.
don't know this case enough. I don't have a law degree. Like, I'm just not qualified to have an opinion whatsoever.
Not that that has ever stopped us from having an
Yeah,
opinion.
not,
Like,
yeah.
not that we've like ever been qualified to have an opinion, but like we do have one.
But like with this, especially like with things relating to domestic violence
Yeah.
and personal relationships, like it was very interesting to see people's opinions on it. So everybody, to give people a perspective on what was going on. um Johnny Depp and Amber Heard were married. They divorced. She wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post about being a survivor of domestic violence. He sued her uh, in the UK, actually, for some, or he didn't sue her in the UK. He sued a newspaper in the UK back, I think, in 2018 because they called him a wife beater. He lost that lawsuit. He then sued Amber Heard after she published this op-ed in the Washington Post. This is the lawsuit that we're talking about. She then, at the same time, countersued him for
Mhm.
defamation. So
I
basically,
thought I thought he sued her for defamation.
yeah, so I'm not explaining this properly again because I don't have a law degree. He sued her for defamation, then she countersued him for defamation.
Okay. Everyone sued for defamation because that's the takeaway from this.
Everybody's suing each other for defamation. I'm gonna be sued for defamation just even talking
Just
about
talking
this
about it. We're gonna get
friggin'
sued.
thing. I'm gonna be sued. Um, so this trial was broadcasted live,
Yeah.
which I like is rarely done. I've never seen a celebrity trial that was broadcasted. I don't have you.
No, I haven't. And I think like that's what kind of added to like the sensationalizing of this. And we can talk about this more when we like get closer into like what happened with like the trial. But I feel like everything that I heard about it was like for or like the headline or whatever like was about Johnny Depp. And I
Mhm.
feel like it played a very real power imbalance. Like obviously there's a power imbalance there, but I feel like it worked in his favor and like therefore against her. Again, I didn't keep up with this trial, but as somebody who didn't keep up with this trial, that was like an observation that I made.
Yes. And it's a good perspective to have because everybody who was giving their opinion on this was extremely like tuned in.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like
I do. Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it.
No, I know what you mean. Okay, sorry. I cut you off before, but
No.
continue.
I was just going to explain that so they're essentially suing each other for defamation over this op-ed.
Okay.
That's the story that we're at today. But then this trial quickly turned into allegations around domestic violence and abuse, and it turned also into a very like anti-Me Too movement, and then also somewhat of like men's rights. So it bubbled up into this really big thing that I think almost went beyond the case itself.
Yeah. The thing that I have, like the problem that I have with I don't know, I have like so many thoughts. My first thought is like it's strange to me that like this case was about and like kind of still focuses on defamation,
Mhm.
because if you want to talk about it entirely from a form of like literally defamation, which again, I am like literally no lawyer, but like was Johnny Depp's name like slandered? Yeah. But I'm like thinking this through because I'm like, if we're literally looking at the topic at hand, which is like defamation, then yes, he was defamed
Yeah.
in that sense.
Yeah.
Was she defamed? Yes. But when it gets more nuanced, I think it becomes more difficult where it's like, okay, but it also has to do with like assault and like intimate partner violence. And
Mhm.
that's when it's like, that I feel like became woven into the story, or like became woven into like what the trial was about, and the trial was just about defamation. And I feel
Yes.
like because so much of that op-ed was about his abuse, it then became like a partner abuse case. But that's actually not what was being tried. But I feel like the jury that is the public and social media like was trying it on a level of like abuse, like domestic abuse.
Yes. That's exactly what it was. And so people were
Yeah.
giving their opinions on evidence brought forward regarding sexual abuse, or not sexual
Yeah.
abuse, or domestic, whatever, like whether
Yeah.
it's domestic
Yes.
violence, sexual abuse, abuse as a whole.
Yes. And I think that that's what makes it so hard, because I feel like the fervor with which people came for Amber Heard, like, I'm not trying to like, I'm not trying to like defend what she did. Like, literally, like even just like my mom, I'm laughing because my mom like watches CP24 like all the time. So she has it on her TV like any single time that I like enter the house, it's like freaking playing. And so like even like the snippets of it that I've caught by like news channels that are covering the trial,
Mhm.
I like it's evident, it's clear that like both of them were at fault, and like both of them were very abusive in different
Mhm.
ways to each other. And like both of those things are valid in that like both of them were abused by the other. And I think I'm like, people are coming for Amber Heard with like so much anger and passion. And I'm like, no, that's great. Like, come for people, but like, you didn't come for like XYZ people with the same amount of like fervor. And like, Johnny Depp also was abusive. Like, it's not as though Johnny Depp wasn't abusive.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this, and I was saying that it's so hard because obviously with the Me Too era, you, we've learned that we need to put the victim stories first, and that we need to believe them when they say that they're being abused. And I know that women coming out and telling their stories is difficult and it's rare. And men have a even more unique experience in that, in which they're almost more, men coming out and about their stories about abuse is even more stigmatized in a way.
Yeah,
So it is very nuanced, and
it
it's
is.
not to discredit anybody's story,
No.
but because it's so personal, and it's so, I publicized in a way, like because the trial was publicized, like I'm less inclined to have an opinion and I'm more put off by the videos that did. Like there was this one account that kept coming up on my For You page,
Mhm.
and she would give a breakdown of the trial of the day. Like they would do a trial that day and she would break it down and she would give like summarized points and her opinion on like what she thinks is coming up next, like what her perspective is. And then when they
People have
and
so much time on
they have
internet
so much
stuff.
time.
Like
Her job,
we're like struggling to make like one reel. We're like, where is the time? People are out here being like, let me do a Spark Notes. Let me like create and put my
yeah, she was
for this.
it, but the way that but that's exactly what it is. Like this trial became so commodified. Like I don't know if commodified is the word, but it's like,
It became like sensationalized.
yes, it became this like content machine. Like people
Yeah.
were literally producing
Yeah.
content out of it. People were making memes out of it, which is
Yeah.
just like really awful. And
Yeah.
so this girl, so she when they announced that the jury had decided and that they were going to announce what the verdict was, she literally posted this video like jumping up and down being like, I can't wait, oh my god, like countdown, 14 minutes left. I'm like, girl, like
Do like anything else.
please, like
like
what is this, what is this? And like I was tuned in. Like I was like, yeah, okay, I wonder like what's going to come out of this freaking 6-week trial that I've been like
Yeah.
unknowingly keeping
Yeah.
up with through TikTok. But it was just insane, like the level of attention it got from the social media universe.
Yeah. And I feel like it also like that was fodder for this case because people were I genuinely did not see a lot of people that were for Amber Heard. Like everyone was for Johnny Depp and I'm like
Yeah.
there is a power imbalance here. Like he's a
Yeah.
freaking huge movie star and like she's not the same status as
No.
him. Um it's a woman coming out which is already very difficult and like I have heard this like thing about Me Too and obviously it is more difficult. I don't want to say it's more difficult. It's just very specific difficulties that men versus women face when
Yes.
coming forward with a case of sexual assault or assault in general. And there's like many different like stigmas at play for both. And there's both of them get discredited in many different ways, and both of
Yeah.
them are equally as bad. But like the truth, I'm like hesitant to say this, but like the truth remains that most victims of domestic violence are
Hmm.
women.
Hmm.
And you can talk about like the toxic masculinity that's at play because of that. But I remember when I worked at like the sexual assault and violence intervention services
Yeah.
of the community in which we live, like that was the case. Like that it's not even like I'm like pulling this number like out of thin air or like making like a judgment. Like that really is like the reality in which we live. And like it's it adds obviously like like a complicated nuance for both men and women that is the case, but in this situation particularly I think it becomes really difficult because at like it's a case of defamation, it's not a case of abuse.
Yeah.
And when we start to get into abuse, like it's very difficult for outsiders to say your abuse is valid versus your abuse is not. And like one of the things that I heard or that I saw, and it was like very, very limited, but one of the things that I saw was somebody being like, I'm so glad Amber Heard didn't win because she was riding on like the coattails of like women who have actually on like she was like riding the wings or whatever that saying is of women who have actually been assaulted. And I was like, but how can you discredit her assault? Like,
Yeah.
and why would you discredit her assault? Like
Yeah.
there's no like I mean, there is literally a hierarchy of assault, but like assault is assault. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
how are you going to discredit somebody's assault? And it's abundantly clear that they were both assaulted and they were both
Yes.
people who were assaulting the other. So like that was the rhetoric that I found really like challenging or like that I found really like difficult to like understand because how like I don't get it. Like how can you say like people were women are assaulted and it's like really bad and I'm really glad that she didn't win because women are actually assaulted and she was trying to like write off that. But it's like well, but she was also assaulted. Like nobody, you know what I mean? Like nobody was there in those moments of like intimately trying to, like nobody was there in the moments when it happened and trying to be like,
Yes.
this accounted for assault. This did not account as assault.
Yes.
Like it's so hard. And like I've seen many things where people are like, oh, well, she was acting so weird, like whatever. And I'm like, okay, but I don't know, like I always struggle with this when people talk about this when they like are in trial or like whatever,
Mhm.
where they're like, their grief didn't look like this, or like they did look like this, or they said this, or they acted like this. And I'm like, it's a very hard thing to go through.
Yeah.
How can you possibly judge how somebody reacted? Like if somebody is not on I was gonna say on stage, but like if somebody's not on trial, like bawling their eyes out, that doesn't mean that like they didn't go through grief or they didn't go through assault or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
And like those, and that's when it becomes tricky because like those standards weren't applied to Johnny Depp.
I agree. And you're on, not only are you on trial, you're on a high profile trial that's being
Yeah.
televised or
Yeah.
broadcasted live, and you're trying to convince a jury. I
And
saw
I
this.
feel like jury members and like lawyers and whatever get swayed. And like I know you're
Yeah.
like you, like take your phone, or I don't know what they do to like make sure that the media isn't a part, like doesn't play a part in like your decision and stuff. But I, with something that is as sensationalized and as televised and
Yeah.
in the media as much as this was, like I find it very difficult to believe that like people didn't like, you know what I mean? Like people weren't being swayed one way or the other, whether it was lawyers, whether it was whoever, like whoever was part of this case.
But that's even like the job of a lawyer is to sway the jury.
Yeah.
So like I feel like regardless, I saw this video today actually, and it was of this, I can't remember what her job title was, but it was on Now This News.
Okay.
So she was basically talking about how, because the jury isn't trained or wasn't trained to identify sexual abuse or domestic abuse,
Yeah.
they misunderstood the trial.
Absolutely.
And had they been trained, they would, like, it's likely that the defamation trial would have gone in Amber's favor. But even something like that is, I'm
That's
like, I'm trying to
controversial.
avoid having an opinion on the trial itself, but I think to that, it okay, I'm gonna make this comment and then I'll see where it goes. But I was gonna say, like, Amber's lawyers compared to Johnny Depp's lawyers seemed like they weren't as strong. But at the same time, there was a massive online campaign for Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
So it just kind of goes to show, like, yes, like, even though they didn't come off as strong or they didn't seem as strong, like, Johnny Depp's team strategy was a lot more invasive in a way because it was so in
Yeah.
your face.
Exactly. And I was actually saying that to somebody. I was like, it feels like he, like part of his strategy or like his team strategy was to like publicize it as much as possible
Yes.
because all of the headlines were about him or like centered around him or his narrative. And I feel like it's so difficult. It's literally what you said. It's so difficult because one, a jury is not trained to identify cases of sexual or partner violence or abuse slash and abuse. And that's why this whole case is so tricky because at the core of it, like what was the case? It was a defamation suit.
Yes.
It was a defamation lawsuit. And I feel like it's been blown, I don't want to say out of proportion. It's just been blown out of the realm of defamation. And it's like so hard because I just feel like this anger that people showed to words Amber heard,
Hmm.
why wasn't there, why like the anger that I saw, which was like again very limit, like I just didn't like see a lot of stuff online,
Hmm.
as much online about it as I think that there was. Um, but it's crazy to me that there was so much anger towards her for, I don't want to say falsifying, but like for being like not a not the textbook victim of what we have in our brains of what like a sexual assault or domestic violence
Yeah.
um victim looks like, and there was none for him. And I'm like, but they were both abused. And in general, if you like take it at an even greater scale, like I feel like that anger wasn't like, if you're truly upset about like domestic abuse and violence and like sexual assault and violence towards women, like that anger should then be there for like a lot of other like millions of other perpetrators that are
Yeah.
there and that are tried like very and trials that are very like sensationalized in and of themselves. I don't
Yeah.
think sensationalized is the right word, but like that are very like in the public.
Yeah.
Um so I think that's one thing. And then the other thing too is like I find it difficult when people like talk about like the Me Too movement
Mm.
because at least as I understand it, and that understanding itself might be wrong. Like I find it difficult to believe that the Me Too movement is specifically like is exclusive in that it doesn't allow men to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And that might be like my misunderstanding. Like, is the Me Too movement specifically for women? But which is fair, which is like fair, and that can be like its own that can be its own movement. But
Right.
I don't I don't know. I find it hard to believe that like a movement that is like meant to call not call in, but like that is meant to like unify women who have faced sexual violence and sexual abuse, like would be like, but you can't be. I don't know. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I do. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier, which is that men have an equal, it's a different but equally important experience when they come out with their
Yeah.
own stories.
Yeah.
And I think what is so interesting about this trial is how quickly, I'm going to say we, obviously this is not you and I, but like
Yeah.
we as a
We as a
general
society.
public, how quickly we were able to paint Amber Heard as the villain in the story. And
Yeah.
it's such a complex lawsuit that I
Yeah.
feel like nobody was really equipped to have an opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I totally agree that I don't think that the Me Too movement was exclusive to women only. I would imagine that it's all victims of abuse. And
I want to look it up, but keep going.
yeah, but I think I remember us having a conversation about Me Too a while ago. I don't know if you remember this. And I think you were telling me how, not that it's been co-opted, but the true origin of Me Too has changed.
Yeah. And I'm looking it up, and it's like the purpose of Me Too is to empower sexually assaulted people
Okay,
through
there you go.
empathy and solidarity, through strength in numbers, especially young and vulnerable women,
Mhm.
um, etc. But I mean, I think like this is like an aside, but I think it's like doubly as bad that if we only conflate Me Too with women because it erases men's experience of violence, of like sexual violence.
Yeah,
So it's like a
I know what
double
you mean.
whammy. It's like we're talking about like men's having like
Yeah.
men's s- experiences with like sexual assault and like how that needs to be validated, but we're saying like Me Too is like for women, and then it like becomes really tricky because then you're essentially erasing their experiences because I don't know, like it's very complicated, and
It's very.
also why I'm like, if a jury in and of itself is not equipped to be able to make the distinction between a defamation suit versus like a sexual or partner violence abuse, like why does TikTok think that they are? And like literally somebody could be listening to this episode being like, okay, well then why the fuck do you guys think that you are? And it's like we don't. Like that's what makes it so tricky. It's like we don't. And it's
Yes.
but I just think it's really hard when you don't validate when you're only validating one side, which happens to be like the straight white cis
Mhm.
rich powerful male's side of violence and like not the women's because her her like experience didn't match what people think like a victim's experience or
Yeah.
composure should be.
And it's not even that we're commenting on the trial itself. We're commenting on
Yeah.
the response of the trial, which has been really just blown out of proportion. I like it's funny because you know how we comment on the Kardashians, but then I will be like, oh, but I actually watched the show, which I literally did today. I like freaking like tuned into their show. But it's just become such you almost can't escape it in a way. Like
Yeah.
it is just
Yeah, like, as
everywhere.
somebody who didn't keep up with it, the fact that I, like, know all of these
Yeah.
things is really hard. I'm like, "Oh, maybe I did keep up with it, and I just didn't
Yeah.
know." But, like, that's what I mean, like, it's so, like, everywhere that you don't even know you're keeping up with it. Like,
No,
no.
exactly. You don't even know how you're processing this information, like how you're taking it in. Like, perfect example, before we started recording, Trini was like, you know what, I don't know a lot about what's been going on. Like, why don't you kick it off and I'll just contribute where I can. But you literally are talking as if you kept up just as much as I did. And that just goes to show how much it's been in our
Vicinity.
yeah, exactly, in our vicinity. And it's speaking of the Kardashians, they actually had a defamation trial that they were going through at the same time that nobody was talking about because it was closed doors. Like, you can, Kris Jenner is like, lock this door.
But
Nobody's coming in.
that's kind of what I wish that Amber Heard and Johnny Depp had done, because I just feel like it's been taken out of context, and
Yeah.
it's turned into something that it's not.
Hmm.
And I wish that it was, like, closed doors, because I feel like less people would have had an opinion, and, like, it could have been truly what it was, which was a defamation suit.
But then that decision to have, again, like, not to comment on the trial, but that decision to have it broadcasted live was a strategic decision that I believe was made by Johnny Depp's team. And it could, like, I would imagine that Amber Heard had to sign off on it as well, because
Yeah,
obviously she had to consent to being
recorded and
to being
whatnot, yeah.
recorded. Yeah, exactly. But um it is, I do think about the trial that the Kardashians were in, which was against Black China, which is also a defamation trial, and they won. And no, like, I did not hear a word about it, maybe an article or two, but it was door
I'm
shut.
like, but
Nobody said a word. It was insane.
isn't it interesting though that in both of these cases, it was like the white or white passing richer team that won both cases? Like, I'm not trying to discredit either party, like, any
Mhm.
way, shape, or form, anybody that was involved in this. I'm not trying to discredit what happened. And obviously I'm no purveyor of truth. Like, I don't know the details, but it's just interesting to me that in both scenarios, that's what happened. And it's interesting that people come for Amber Heard, but, like, don't recognize the tactic that Johnny Depp and his team used, which was literally to mitigate and, like, erode a woman's story and, like, discredit her in the public eye, in, like, the public jury or court or whatever we want to call it, that is now, like,
Yeah.
social media or whatever.
Yes.
And, like, nobody thinks about, I mean, not nobody, but, like, a lot of people and most people on TikTok, like, don't think about it like that. They're not like, "Oh, isn't it so weird how his entire strategy was to discredit her in the media and in, like, the world?" And, like, the repercussions that will come for each will be very different.
Totally. You just brought up a really good point. It wasn't about convincing the jury that was in the courtroom. It was about convincing the jury that is online, that is every single person who's been keeping up with this trial.
Yeah. Yeah. Or who hasn't, like me, and is just, like, a viewer. And, like,
Yes.
if I didn't keep up with it and have all these thoughts, like, somebody who also didn't keep up with it might have very different thoughts that are like, "Oh, no, like, Amber
Yeah.
Heard was wrong."
I think we as a society just need to take a step. Let's just go touch some grass. Like, I just think that we need
Touch
to,
some
like,
grass, I'm
take
dead.
a step back, and like, this is me included, but this entire trial just gave me, like, not the ick, but I was like, this, all of it, nothing feels right for me. Like,
Yeah.
nothing feels right. Um, I can't have an opinion. I don't want to have an opinion. I will engage. I will consume this content.
Yeah.
But me personally, I don't really have much to say. And I'm struggling. Like, you can even hear as I'm explaining, like, I'm struggling to form an opinion on anything having to do with this trial. But I think we as a society need to really understand what our obsession is with. It's almost like, I read this online that it kind of coincides with our obsession with true crime, but not just true crime, live true crime. So when
Yeah.
that, like, I think her name is Gabby Petito,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Instagram influencer, when she went missing, people were keeping up with it as if they were the detectives on the case. Like, everybody feels like they are in a
You're
space.
entitled.
Yeah, I don't, but the thing is, like, it is entitlement, but I don't know if entitled is like the word that I have in mind to explain what it is, but it's like everyone is suddenly an expert in this field.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of the accessibility of information that there is online now compared to, in the past, but everyone is suddenly an expert and everyone feels empowered to have an opinion on this. And it's so nuanced that how can you have an opinion on this?
No, I totally agree. How can you have an opinion on this, and how can you have such a resolute opinion on this? Like,
Yes.
I I think that is like one of the hardest things with social media overall, and this case is like it's like the perfect case in point, but like I feel like what social media has become is like you can't even bring forth like new information, and people are like, oh, people are like, "Oh, like I have learned new information, like I've changed my mind now." Like
Yeah.
they are so resolute in what they think and what they believe, and it's like
Yeah.
like first of all, everyone is allowed to change their opinion, which I think needs to be said because I feel like their opinions become almost like if I disagree with an opinion, it's like I disagree with you. Like I don't agree with you as a person. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, like you are not your opinion. Like you can disagree with an opinion and you can change your mind about an opinion on both sides. And I think like that is the only time that I think I will say things have become a little too personal
Hmm.
because I feel like even for small things, if all of a sudden you're like, I actually don't like this skincare line, people will like come for you. People are like, how could you like, do you know what I mean? Like, especially people in like celebrities or people with like some sort of like social power in terms of whatever, in terms of like following or whatever, like anything you say is like a reflection of now you. And I feel like that's really harmful and reductive for actual narratives that are helpful to take place. And this is
And
like a
growth.
very and growth and literally and growth,
Yeah.
like personal and otherwise growth. Like, and I feel like that's like a big part of what happened in this case where like things were like taken so I don't want to say they were taken so literally, but I just mean like people's opinions are so closely tied with like who they are, which obviously they would be, but I just mean like there was no room for understanding
Yeah.
and I feel like in people's response to this, or there was no room for growth. There was no room for like further analysis. I hate these words that I'm using, but like there was just like no room.
I think even just this idea, like, when you're talking about it, it's almost like the evolution of cancel culture, like
Yeah.
how cancel culture has evolved, not to hold people accountable, but to cement what people have said in the past to who they are
Yes.
today. And
Yes.
it's like, what are we like? I actually will never forget the day that we signed up for Twitter. Do you remember we were together?
I don't.
We just like, I think we like went to the mall, we went back, we're like, okay, we're gonna sign up for Twitter. We were like 15, maybe 15, 16. We're like, okay, this is the day we're gonna sign up. So we signed up. I do not want to know what my first tweet was or any other tweet. And I would probably want to pull every strand of my hair out if I found out that a tweet I wrote a billion years ago came out and is like, look what Nadine wrote back in God knows when. Because my opinions, my thoughts, who I was is completely different. Like, I feel like I'm really digressing from the original topic, but it just does go to show how cancel culture has evolved and like how do we hold people accountable today?
Yeah, how do we hold people accountable today? And like as it relates to this case, like how do we give context to what's happening? Like, and like the only the
Yeah.
not the only, but the biggest thing that I can think of is like people are out here debating like who was and who wasn't assaulted, or what a type of who was whose assault was more valid. And I'm like, but this case isn't even about assault, it's about defamation. So like when we talk about a win for Johnny Depp or Amber Heard, like what's the win we're talking about? Because like all of those instances of abuse that came out are still they're still valid. Like this wasn't a case to validate who was and wasn't assaulted, or who even assaulted, because it was very clear that they both did. Do you know what I mean? And like the idea of like cancel culture, I feel like is like a part of this, is like comes into this because like now we've like quote unquote what canceled Amber Heard, but like on what basis? Because it's not as though Johnny Depp didn't commit
Yeah.
assault.
But
But
that,
like, but it's like you said, people are so cemented in what they think or what they believe, like they haven't even necessarily taken the time to be like, but wait, what was this case about? And then what are the other things that came out of it that are a separate issue almost?
I find it, again, like speaks to the messiness of this trial, because back when the op-ed that Amber Heard wrote came out, Johnny Depp was canceled. He lost all of his movie deals. He was kicked off of the Fantastic Beasts franchise. He was no longer, or they were no longer going to be doing the next Pirates of the Caribbean. So there was a quantifiable amount of money that he lost as a result of this.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Amber Heard has also lost money. And so, like,
And like, is this now some sort of vindication of
yeah,
like, you know what I mean? Sorry, it's like very
exactly.
dark because the sun is setting and I don't have
Oh,
the lights on.
no problem.
It's fine. But is this like, is the fact that like he won like some sort of vindication of like, oh my God, like all these people dropped me, and
Yeah.
like I told you that it was wrong. But like then again, like it's so difficult because then we talk about like a defamation suit and it's like, okay, he was defamed.
Yeah.
The next argument would be like, was it valid or not? Or I don't know, I guess if I don't know if that's part of like a defamation suit, but he was like it he obviously was defamed because he
Yeah.
lost all these things. So like all of these deals and all of these business opportunities. So but like I know people have and will, and him, Johnny Depp himself, is going to use this as some sort of like vindication or validation of like, oh, but look, like I told you I didn't do it and now the court believes me, because that's the narrative that's been spun in the media.
Isn't like, yes, yes, that. And then to add to that, because I know you were talking about power imbalance in the beginning, like he already came in with a fan base that was behind him.
Yeah.
And like even looking at after the verdict was announced and he won, essentially, they
Yeah.
each put out a statement, him and Amber Heard. And I read this BuzzFeed article and it was like, here's, I don't know if they meant to make this point, but it was like, here's the list of everyone who's liked Johnny Depp's post versus here is the list of everyone who's liked Amber Heard's. And the list of people rooting for Johnny Depp was like so
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
The one for Amber Heard only had 4 people. And so like that in itself is an
And like,
indication not just of like how society is replying, but like Hollywood in general is
absolutely.
responding to this. And
Yeah.
it it is isn't isn't a lawsuit subjective to a certain point? Like you're obviously going to
Like you
provide
think that the law
evidence.
is subjective, but like hasn't it been proven many, many times that it's clearly not?
Yeah, like I obviously you're going to submit your evidence and you're going to make your case, but again, isn't the lawyer's job to sway the jury in their favor?
And yes, and like I think the whole reason for things like critical race theory is because we have all realized that the law,
It's
although
subjective.
it seems objective, is very subjective,
Yeah.
and in its use is very subjective, and
Yeah.
in its like what it upholds is very subjective, and like favors specific demographics and specific groups and communities. And I
Yes.
think it's so hard too, because like the thing that you're talking about where it's like a list of who liked what, I kind of speaks to that, because like how do you know that like what people really felt, but in Hollywood or in media, and felt like they couldn't
Yes.
actually like her post or whatever because of what an influence and what a big figure Johnny Depp is in Hollywood.
Yeah, 100%.
So like that in itself speaks to what you were talking about of like a power imbalance.
Yes. Yes. And even when we're talking about like the law being subjective, the literal role of the Supreme Court is to
Yes.
interpret the
Interpret.
Constitution,
Yeah.
not give an expert opinion. It's to interpret.
Yeah.
Anyways, like I said, I
Like
don't have a
we
law
are not
degree.
experts.
This
Us,
is
not lawyers.
crazy. You won't find me on like TikTok legal talk anytime soon. I
Legal.
like no hate to anyone who had an opinion on this. Me personally, it's gonna be a no. It's like I'm not on Reddit. I'm not on Reddit, but apparently there's this thread that is like, are you the asshole? And you send in like a story and people will tell you whether you're the asshole or not.
I think I've heard of this.
And I think like the options are like, you're the asshole, not the asshole, everyone's the asshole. And this is like a situation for me
This is,
personally
yes.
where everyone is the asshole.
I couldn't agree more. Everyone is the asshole. Everyone was shitty. And like
Yeah.
TikTok and the general public the cannot be the deciding factor on like what we think,
Yeah.
who we think should be the asshole in the situation. Like
Yeah.
everybody is an asshole. And I think that's maybe the only thing we can all agree on.
Even if you have a law degree, you are not qualified to have an
Even if
opinion
you
on
have
this.
a law degree, I feel like you would be like, everybody's the asshole.
I'd be like, what the hell's going on? Yeah. I feel like it's just, again, it's such a personal, not experience isn't the word I want to use, but like an experience in a way, like this is a very personal issue between the two of them. And like,
We're not, yeah, like we cannot
let's
be.
not, yeah, like bottom of, to sum this up, let's not discredit victims of domestic violence, no matter who they
Of
are.
which they clearly both were. I am dead because you can't even see me at this point. I am like a haze. I'm like a ghost. I wish I was a ghost in the trial room and I could have also known as a court. I'm dead. And I wish I could have known the details. Like you've literally seen the sunset through this video because I have no other lights on and the sun's been setting. So